Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Trans-Experience L.A. During this episode, we are going to be speaking to Sabel Samone-Loreca, longtime advocate here in the Los Angeles area, who started doing work with youth along with Alexis Rivera. Hi Sabel, how are you?
Hi Adrienne.
So tell us a little bit about you before we get started. When did your activism start, and then eventually when you connected with Alexis?
So originally I started working in San Francisco. I worked with Tenderloin Housing Resource Center. I've worked with a number of other organizations there in San Francisco, as well as being one of the first transgender women to work with CHAMP, California Helping Alleviate Medical Problems. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the first medical pharmacies that became available to trans folks to have support groups that were also going through having medical problems and that were using medical cannabis, so that they had a place to sit and talk and be able to just kind of know that there was someone there just like them. And so I did like some of the research, some of the intake, kind of work the front desk and the front door type stuff, as well as facilitate groups on Saturdays. And so that kind of brought along other groups after that for San Francisco, with people recognizing that trans women were actually developing programs that were helping themselves in that community. It was also during the time where the word transgender was beginning. Working
around what year was this?
This was between 1999 and 2000. The actual word transgender got its footing in 1998 and 1999, working with Joanne Keeley and Senator Mark Leno, and doing focus groups with them and several other trans women throughout the community. The word was developed, and so we have this word that describes us as a whole today, being transgender. Sometime after that, I moved to Los Angeles, where I initially kind of moved a path, people assisting the homeless. Mm-hmm. And because I'm HIV positive, I was able to get into housing fairly quick there and receive services. And because I was trans, it was even better, because as the guidelines and policies had been changing in the beginning for San Francisco, some of those were slowly rolling down to the Los Angeles area, and a lot of the Los Angeles community had begun to fight for shelters and programs to be able to allow trans women to be sort of given the same permission as cisgender women, and having that protection of where I sleep at, how I live, and living my life in my womanhood. So for me, it was very easy in that sense, because I was constantly on a battle of a sense of I was either teaching or advocating for someone through the spirit of what I knew about. Being positive, I eventually got involved with some fundraising work for PATH, as well as doing some work with Minority AIDS Project and becoming a client with them. In the process of becoming a client with them, I got into a program called HIV Stops With Me with Richard Hamilton and Scott Rowland, partnering with the Gay and Lesbian Center, and started that program, which was out of San Francisco, the mentoring base. And so for about maybe 8 years, I was a spokesmodel for women of color, trans women of color that were HIV positive. I was kind of the face of that program. There were several other trans women that came along soon after, but I kind of stayed the one that was around the longest. So which was a lot of fun and a really good experience. Through that campaign, I got a job with Minority AIDS Project, doing work with the trans community and working with Terry Tinsley.
In our last episode, we spoke to the amazing advocate Sabel Samone. She told us about her history and the incredible work she has done here in Los Angeles to improve the lives of transgender people. Now, we're going to come back with Sabel and talk about Sabel's youth. What was it like growing up as a trans child? So today I would like to reintroduce you to Sabel Samone. Hi,
Thank
Sabel, how are you?
I'm good, Drian. Hi.
Wonderful, good to see you.
So my childhood was, it was kind of confusing for me in the beginning, overall.
And Sabel, tell us, what was the landscape like? Was trans out there? Were gay people out there?
Okay, so we'll go back really far.
Where was this?
This was in Tampa.
Okay.
I'm originally born in Tampa, Florida, Tampa General Hospital. I am the oldest of two. I have a younger sister, and my mother is the third child of 14 kids.
Oh.
I grew up with a big family sense of background. I initially went to Catholic school, academy schools and boarding schools most of my life.
Wow, how was
My
that?
mom was very determined into making sure we had a really good education. So one of the first schools I went to was Miss Wimberly's school. And I guess for me, in the sense, it was more, that's when I think more of my questioning about sexuality started. And I started to act out a little bit, I think. I've heard stories from my parents about little things I've done that made them think that my gender was up for questioning. Back then, it was more of you were either a sissy boy or you were gay or you were, fag hadn't come up yet, but you were very feminine. Everybody knew, oh, you're going to be a girly girl. And in the African American community, it was really about being, oh, you're just a little gay boy, that type of environment.
And was that a negative thing, or were your parents okay with it?
In the beginning, at my youth, I think it was not such a big issue. It was more about just us being kids, and there are male role models in my family, so it wasn't like I didn't have male role models growing up. I went through Miss Wimberly kindergarten and did the whole, back then, I guess in the South, it's that whole cotillion. So I grew up with the aspects of, how can I say, debonair's balls. And so I was kind of part of a debonair's turning of age and playing that role. And then I went into moving on, I went to St. Peter Claver School, which is actually one of the first Black Catholic schools in Tampa, Florida. And most of my family actually worked there.
Oh, wow.
So as time got on, this is more where I realized that my sexuality, I wouldn't say sexuality, I would say my attraction to the opposite sex I knew something wasn't right, but what it was, I didn't have a clue. And I don't think, for many of us at that time, we kind of knew what it meant to be gay. So I think everybody equated everything to being gay. If you weren't attracted to women, you were attracted to men, you were considered gay. So as a young kid, I was into all kinds of sports. I played basketball, ran track. But during this time, I realized that I was different because other young kids, male kids, would acknowledge my transition, would acknowledge that I was more feminine than they were, even though I played tons of sports.
And was this bullying?
From some kids, it was more bullying. For some, I guess they felt the need to protect me.
Oh.
So it was, I had a lot more that protected me than I did that bullied me.
Oh.
Being that, again, most of my family worked in the school, so it wasn't as easy as a lot of people would think to have bullied me because they knew there would be some type of retaliation in that sense. But at the same time, I was assaulted for the first time in school.
How old were you?
I was in the 4th grade, so
Wow.
I was attacked. There's a local neighborhood bar that was within walking distance of the school, and I remember one evening having to go out during basketball practice, and I guess I wasn't really on the team at the time, but I was there after school and I had to go get the ball. And that's when I was assaulted, and apparently it had been happening for some time, but I just didn't have I hadn't put my mind to what was going on, and so it finally got out at that point. My family got involved, the police got involved, and it became a whole big issue.
Yeah.
So for me, I think
And
as I
assault.
got older with the assault, a lot of my childhood was for him. He went through all this stuff, and that's why his life is, that's why she's now acting the way she is, or, you know, I was acting the way I was acting at that point in time.
And was the assault due to your gender identity, or was it something else?
It was just a pervert molesting a child,
Oh.
pretty much. It had nothing to do with anything. It was just someone just wanting to assault me because I was a kid. And yeah. So soon after, well, sometime after that, my mom noticed I started having, by 8th grade, I attempted my first suicide.
Oh my goodness.
In the bathroom of my school. I started having more problems with kids in school. By the 10th grade, I had already been put into a mental hospital for 6 months, which, you know, some people would say.
By the 10th grade?
By the 10th grade, I was in
Wow.
a mental hospital. I had spent 6.5 months there.
Wow.
Based on insurance. After a certain time period, you're released. But the sad part of it all was they thought they were going to change me or something, or be able to help me change how I felt.
Like a
I was
little bit
again
of-
sexually assaulted within the facility there. And from there, I was physically assaulted by one of the staff. Which, because my insurance could no longer cover it, I really didn't get the help. So I was put out of the facility and then put into a county facility. So throughout, I say between the ages of, I say around the 4th grade and the time I graduated high school, I say no, by the time of 18, I'll put it that way. I probably had about maybe 10 different attempts of suicide.
Oh my gosh, wow.
And maybe 4 that were really close. My 18th birthday, my 19th birthday, I attempted suicide, and that's when the state of Florida, the state of the city of Tampa health department and mental health department stated that if I didn't stop or figure out what the hell was going on with me, that at that point they would commit me to the hospital and I would be there until further notice.
Wow.
That's when I actually ran away from home. So, and I knew, you know, I felt like nobody could help me figure out what was going on. And because I think, you know, coming from an African American community, at that point in time, there are so few of us go off of ignorance about sexuality and gender, that, you know, we grew up with what our parents grew up with, the knowledge that our grandparents grew up with, and they grew up with that knowledge. And so it just kind of carries on in life, and nobody really takes the time out to learn, you know, that there are differences in gender. One of the things I can say is I had, as a kid, I remember family talking about, we had a friend that was intersex, but they called them, it was another name. And so I've always known them, you know, and so we knew that there was an issue that someone could be born with 2 genders, 2 sexual orientations and have to deal with that, or the 2 genders and having to deal with that. And then later on I learned about, through education, just history about a doctor in New York that had worked on 2 kids and one was trans, but there was very little information. So that within that, we continued to, I moved to Atlanta and I learned as much as I could.
So, Sabel, you know, I think that what you're talking about is so incredibly important. You know, I think when you hear the statistics out there of 40%, more than 40% of trans youth attempt suicide, not just think about it, you know, I think that's a very powerful thing. And I think what you're helping is really sort of to paint a picture of what would drive a youth to think about that or attempt that. For you, what do you think was your saving grace? What pulled you through to survive attempting suicide as a youth?
Well, I think a lot of it was probably around the last time. I guess I would say I was about 18, 19 years of age, and I had a really good relationship with my grandmother. I probably wasn't the nicest kid to my grandmother and my family, but I had a really good, strong relationship with her. And it was one of those things where she was the one person I told when I finally decided to run away from home. You know, I kind of was like, I need to get out of Florida. I need to get away. I don't know what I'm going to do. But when I get situated, I'll call you, let you know where I'm at. And it was, you know, the fact my grandmother supported me when nobody else did, I guess. And that, so knowing that I had that kind of support from someone, you know, it made me push forward, because it was, I think a lot of it at that, when you're young at that age, and a lot of the thought process is that you're on your own and you have no one.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, even though you have your parents and, you know, because again, a lot of my issues around my gender and identity, it really wasn't about me being a bad kid or, you know, my family wasn't really upset about me being, you know, because my mom was one of those people, I don't care about you being gay, just be the gayest homosexual you gonna ever be. You know, if you gonna be gay, don't be half-ass about it, be gay all the way and do, you know, and take care of yourself, do it the right way, lead a good life and be productive in society. You know, if that's the way you choose to live your life, you know, your sexuality, you know, she's always raised us that way. But it wasn't that. I think I had more issues with identifying who I was and not really knowing at that point in time too, you know, because it was easy to accept that I was very feminine and gay, and do shows and be a show queen and all of that stuff. But to feel like that was my life was more than that, and my gender was more than just putting on makeup and a dress and a wig and standing on someone's stage. You know, my life wasn't that I wanted to live that way just on stage. That was who I was every day, and I wondered why I wasn't having the physical experience as my mental experience was. And so when you don't know those things and you don't have family that is there to help you understand all of that, or even know it themselves, you know. And it wasn't that my family was uneducated or anything. My mother was very smart and intellectual. I mean, she bought us encyclopedias. That's how I knew more about, okay, I knew I was gay, but you know, and that was the way I identified, because I had these red and gray childhood encyclopedias to learn things from. But I knew by reading those books, I also knew it was more. It was something else different than just that, you know. And I didn't know what that was, and not having the support to have my family back me and saying this is what it is. And you know, so for me it was fear, it was hurt, it was shame. You know, I'm the eldest, I'm supposed to be the one that was supposed to carry on kids in the family and the family names and bring out all of that stuff. And so when you have all, you know, I think our family doesn't realize the pressure that they put on our shoulders to be, you know, it's not one of those things where they expect and tell you really to be great, but it's subconscious how they tell you, we want you to be better than us, and we want you to be great, and we want you to accomplish. And when, I mean, my mother put me in boarding school. I mean, I went to Catholic schools, I went to Jesuit schools, Mary Hill Christian Our Boys School. You know, I went to some of the best schools in Florida, and to have all that pressure on my shoulders of doing better than and being better than, it was difficult, and not knowing who I was. So it kind of was like you had a mental breakdown as a kid, and you keep having them, so you keep attempting suicides in hopes that someone will recognize that something is wrong, and when no one ever does, you either end up, you just continue that process until finally, you know, your reach out for help isn't answered and you're gone. And then it's at that point where everybody's like, and that's the sad part of it all, because people are then at that point of saying, oh, why did this have to happen? This did not have to happen. If I could have, would have, should have done this or that, then my child would still be here. when most of the times as parents, they don't listen.
Oh, yeah.
It's not really about, I never saw the signs. It's you just didn't pay attention, and what you wanted was more important than what the kid wanted.
That's
so when
key.
you look at it from that point of view, it's like you have to stop and put your biases aside. Yes, we want our kids to be great, but who is my kid? You know, really pay attention as your kid develops in life and understand what that means, because your idea of what that kid's story is ultimately not going to be the end result. And true enough, we push and we think we're pushing because we think that's what the kid wants. But do we ever get to the point of saying, is this really what you want to do? And if you had the option of doing this versus that, would you?
Absolutely.
Because then you'd know what to really push them in and how to push them. But we don't. And ultimately for me, I said, you know, it was my grandmother's support in saying, you know, she didn't stop me and say, no, I'm going to call your mother and your parents and I'm going to make sure you stay here in Tampa and you're not going to go anywhere. You know, she kept my secret, she let me go. And I thank her for that, because although I was homeless because I ran away, I was put in other predicaments where my life was at risk. I've done a lot of things that put my life in danger in order to survive on the streets, because I needed to find out who I was. And ultimately, going through that educational process are some of the things that kept me from going back to attempting suicide. It kept giving me a reason to live, in a sense, because the more I was out there, the more I ran into people that were able to teach me bits and pieces. You know, my first trip into Atlanta, I learned about the drag community from a different perspective, because my mother tried to keep us so closed in and so shut off from everything else. I knew little bits and pieces. You know how as kids you run, you leave home, you break out the window and everything, and you go and find stuff. So, but I didn't have that leeway to really do that. So I wasn't at home. I wasn't where family was. I wasn't where people knew who I was at, who I was. So it was easier for me to move to another city, and for me that was Atlanta. And I was able to live my life and enjoy experiencing these things. Some difficult, some not so difficult. That's where I was diagnosed in 85, 86. March of 86, I was diagnosed HIV positive. It was a life experience. You know, a lot of things were good in my life, but a lot of things were bad in my life. And I think for me, you know, that was one of the time points in my life where it made the pivotal point, because I didn't take it as a death sentence. I took it as a chance for me to figure out really how to go about, okay, sit down, quit running the streets. It wasn't about, okay, now I can figure out who I am and start my transition because I'm positive or anything. It was more so about, I can sit down. Now you sit down and slow down and take time out to figure out how to better take care of yourself.
Oh, yeah. And Sabel, you know, I also want to go back a little bit, because I think, you know, being trans is often difficult in communities of color sometimes because of culture and what have you, and then also in religious communities. And talking about your experience of going to Catholic school and things like that, was religion supportive for you during this process, or was it something that was negative or neutral?
Religion really wasn't an issue.
Like going to Catholic school?
At Catholic school, I was pretty much, I mean, most of my classmates knew me as being gay. I was very open and very out about it. I really, you know, it was one of those things where that wasn't the issue for me more so than anything else. And my religion was, you know, once leaving Catholic school and continuing getting my education, my grandmother was Jehovah's Witness. So I've had multitudes of different experiences when it comes to religion. I knew what Baptists and Methodists and, you know, one of the things my family firm believe in is, I don't care what religion it is, you go to church Sunday morning. And so, and I don't care what the problem is in life, you still go to church Sunday morning. So I grew up in an environment where I've always seen the gayness of my community. in that sense, as much as people try to say, that's one of the things I have an issue with kind of with churches and stuff, is they talk so heavily about being gay and being gay in the church. When you go to most Baptist churches and you have the gospel choir, 90% of the church, 90% of the choir is gay and transgender, but nobody wants to really acknowledge the fact that they're gay and transgender.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we're there.
So, today we have been talking to Sabel Samone and have been just hearing Sabel's incredible life, which has led her to become the amazing advocate that she is today. Sabel, for youth and for parents and for anybody who watches this video, what's the message you want them to take home? What do you want them to know about trans experiences, trans youth, trans people?
For youth, and I say this in particular for young people, in identification and identifying who they are, you don't have to get to a point of committing suicide. I know it seems difficult and it seems very hard, but if you persist and be patient and just take in some time and breathe, it'll be okay. The support comes from wherever you're willing to accept that support from. For me, it was my grandmother and her spiritualness of support. Because when I think, even today, when I think I'm having a rough day, I think about my grandmother, and that gives me the support to continue to move on. Because I think about the things she would tell me about, you can do this, baby, I know you got it. You're my star, you're grandma's baby, you can do anything. And just use those little incentives of family or support that you have around you to continue. Your life is so much more than what it is right now. In the end, in the future, if you give yourself the opportunity to continue to push forward in your life, you will reap so much happiness. I'm not a superstar, I lead a very average life. I don't have riches, I live from paycheck to paycheck and all of that. But I'm happy with Sabel. I've lost my husband. I've overcome things that people would have never imagined me overcoming. Hate violence, Hep C, all these things have come through my life medically and physically. And at 49 years old today, I'm able to say I'm still here, I'm still standing. And this is what it looks like if you let the process continue, if you continue to fight it. You can get to this point. They say we die off at 30. Our life expectancy isn't until, by 30 years of age. You don't see many of us, and you don't see many old trans folks, but we're still here. And if you continue to give that spirit, you'll make people's minds change that much more. What I say about parents and just getting, I know it's been a lot been said for myself, but for a parent that is realizing that their child is having some issues in life, it's not about you. It's not about what you expect. Just listen, If it means, and I don't want to take in derogatory, but sometimes we have to start at home, And it's not about what people outside expect from us. It's about what we expect from ourselves at home.
Oh, yeah.
If you respect your child for who they are at home, society can respect you and respect your child for who they are out on the street.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you as a parent and as a family member can walk down the street with your child being who they authentically wish to be and love them for who they authentically wish to be, society can learn to love them and trust them and respect them for who they authentically wish to be. Because we learn from each other. If we can accept, we've accepted, I've lived long enough, I've said, we've had a black president. Mm-hmm. We've had black congressmen. We've had black men that are captains in naval that as an African American woman, there's a time when it was said that we could not achieve. And what I'd like all my races of color, especially my African American sisters and brothers that are transitioning, I want you to know that we can succeed to a higher plateau. It has been proven. And as long as you have that process within you, and you have the belief within you to do that, you can do anything. And family, I have my love of my mom, my mom's like, as long, I've always cared, I've always known, you're the one that had the issue. And it's most of the time we are the ones. I mean, for me, myself, I was my biggest problem because I didn't know. And I think with having this process and having a place of history to be able to look back on, I think a lot of young people will now know. For me, there was no education. There was no books for me to go to the library and read. There were no films on television for me to see. At least with my gay community, I had some type of recognition of what that was about or how to deal with that. But when it came to really understanding who I was authentically, there was no history. And the only other history that was there was mockery and joked upon. So in learning who I am today and being, I'm grateful for Sabel. I'm grateful for what I've achieved. And I'm also grateful to be able to have been around, to be able to see the transition of life and change in education in my community. It's like I started as, it's one of those things as a black person in the African American community, we say we never see a black president, or we will never see where our schools and black and cultures can mix and be happy together. Well, for me, I've gotten to see all of that. I've been there, I was born at the end of the time when Martin Luther King was killed. And to have, every day we want to say, with his birthday coming up and things are going on, what was his dream about? And this is his dream. People of all races, of all colors, of all genders, all sexualities, being able to live amongst each other and to be happy. And that's what I think we should learn from all of this.
Thank you, Sabel. This is the dream. This is what we want. And the trans community is also grateful for Sabel and all the work that you've done, and that you are a powerful role model for others and for our youth. So thank you, Sabel, for all that you do and for being such an amazing goddess. Thank you so much. Oh, I love you, sister. Oh. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Trans-Experience L.A. Today we've had the amazing honor to get to know one of LA trans community's most influential, long-standing icon. Thank you to Sabel Samone for all the work that you've done, for all the work that you're doing, and for being an inspiration to all trans people. This has been another episode of Trans-Experience L.A.